War. War never changes.
Said one Perlman once or twice. Welcome to the first episode of Gamers Book Club, a show where I recommend books that influenced some of our favorite games. But first, word of the day. Word of the day is Zerust. Noun. According to Douglas Adams and John Lloyd, Zerust is datedness of something originally intended to seem futuristic. It is also a city in South Africa. Fallout is many things, but at its core, it is a byproduct of Cold War era propaganda, of paranoia, of atomic age, and various cultural leftovers from pulp fiction. So let's start with works of fiction that directly influenced it. And I'll divide them depending on which aspect of the series you're interested in most. So let's start with Brotherhood of Steel. Brotherhood of Steel is a prominent faction in the series. They are this highly secretive, semi-quasi-religious order that has devoted themselves to preserve and gather energy and develop new energy and protect the future generations from advanced weaponry. It consists of remnants of US military that kind of separated itself from the Enclave. An Enclave was this evil, to put it simplistically, evil part of US military that condoned experimentation on people and, depending on who you ask, the whole war and bombs. Number one influence on this faction, and actually number one influence on the entire series, and especially on the first game, that being Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, is a 1959 science fiction masterpiece, A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr. I'll say it now. If you want to read, and if you are to read any book from this list, please make it this one. It was inspired by author's personal life. He was a soldier. He served as a gunner in World War II, and he participated in the Allied bombing of a monastery. And it deeply, deeply traumatized him. And it is also the only novel that he has ever written. There is a posthumously published sequel, but it was incomplete, so take that what you will. It is set in a Roman Catholic monastery in the desert, somewhere in southwestern United States. And it takes place after a devastating nuclear war. Now, it is divided in 3 sections, and each has this sort of time jump. So I'm going to talk the most about the first part because the rest are very, very spoilerific. So, what is it about? It is called Canticle for Leibowitz because it takes place in a monastery, and the main sort of people and the main connection with Fallout are the monks of the Albertian Order of Leibowitz. And they are an order of monks that devoted themselves to gather and disseminate all of the mankind's knowledge, all of the scientific knowledge, and to prepare for a day on which the society, the humanity, might need it. And it, as I said, it's divided in 3 time periods, so the most interesting one and the most pertinent to the Fallout one is the first one that takes place in this quasi-medieval period of after the apocalypse. And it is the most influential one, I feel. The influences from the book range from my sort of number one thing that I love about Fallout, which is repurposing the artifacts of the past for their unintended use. So when you have an item and you divorce it from the original context and you repurpose it for something else, you get something like, my favorite example of that is Fallout New Vegas. If you played that, you have this faction called Caesar's Legion, and they are these violent brutes that terrorize the wastes. And what they do is they found sports gear, things like football gear, and used it as armor. They have no context of football. They don't even know the word football, probably. They don't see it as retro. They don't see it as quote-unquote aesthetic. They just used this thing that was on the ground and now it serves a purpose. And that's something I really, really like about Fallout and about Canticle for Leibowitz. Further influences and themes are uncovering and valorizing seemingly mundane aspects of society that has been long gone. Example of this is, the title itself, Leibowitz. They are a monastery, and they look upon this Saint Leibowitz, who has not been yet canonized. But who is Leibowitz? Leibowitz is, minor spoilers, just a Jewish engineer pre-war who had just his initials somewhere. And for whatever reason, hundreds and hundreds of years after that, he became this saint. And further influences, I would say, are also just general themes of cyclical nature of the human conflict. There is a reason why the whole series have this arc words, this motto of war never changes. The novel is set in 3 different time periods, and it displays rebuilding of society, and you can see that the society is kind of going through the same curve of development as it did pre-war. So the conflict does not go away. The way we lead war may change. Swords, guns, laser rays, whatever, but the conflict, it remains the same. Next, if you're just a fan of roaming the wasteland and the life in the vault as it is depicted in various games in the series, I would highly recommend The Penultimate Truth by Philip K. Dick. And that's another highly, highly influential book from my point of view to the whole series. It is an eerily prescient book if you take into account how many thematic and explicit world-building similarities it shares with Fallout. Now, usually I wouldn't spoil stuff, minute details. I can spoil, in my videos, I can spoil just general bits, but this is a very short novella, and just the nature of PKD's writing, it's never about the plot, it's never about the details, it's about the hysteria and just the nature of his writing. So, what it is about? It is set in far future, somewhere after World War III, and it is fought by ladies, which are, robots who are made to withstand nuclear radiation. And the US is divided in 2 sides, East and West. And both sides use those robots, those ladies, human-looking robots, to fight the war. And they do so because the rest of the humanity lives underground in these huge vaults, but they're not called vaults here, they're called tanks. The whole thing is so, I don't want to say wacky. It's so darkly, nihilistically funny, yet so disturbing, because the actual world is not what it seems to be. And the number of just similarities and things, for example, we have human-like robots, i.e. synths, in the Fallout universe. We have bunker societies living in a lie. So it's just a lie, just like Vault-Tec built a lie with its vaults and their experimental nature. And there are several other things like, giant spoiler ahead, President being a computer, just like in Fallout 3. So there's a lot to unpack in this tiny book. It's a novella, actually, I think 150 pages. And my last recommendation is for anyone who is just a fan of the collapsed society aspect. And the book, or it's also a novella that kind of displays it a lot, is A Boy and His Dog by Harlan Ellison. And it is a look of life into an average person. His name is Vic and he has a dog, and they wander post-apocalypse after World War IV in United States. And it is a novella, and the connection between that and Fallout is largely general. But what I like about it, despite being written in 1969, I believe, it doesn't rely on visuals and visual cues of a bygone era. Instead, it just taps into this nihilistic feeling of what apocalypse does to morals of an average person, an average human being, which is something that is very prevalent in Fallout, especially in the first game. That first game is fairly bleak. And fair warning, it has some very unsavory elements in it. It's not populated by nice people. As a side note, a side recommendation, there is another work of Harlan Ellison that is directly referenced by Fallout, actually directly lifted. There is a quest called Tranquility Lane in Fallout 3 that directly lifts its entire premise from Harlan's probably most famous work called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's a short story in which a computer tortures humans. And no spoilers. So thank you for joining me. I would like to thank my Patreon contributor Ethan for his continued support. Wheel of Time videos are coming, they're in the works. Hope you like this. Please suggest if you want me to get into any other franchise next. Bye bye.